station to station, out of hibernation. Dustin, been a long winter. Haven't chatted Jays in a while. We rested and put our feet up over the long, cold winter. Off season 2025, 2026. Maybe give me some thoughts since we haven't really talked Jays in, 4 months.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's probably one of the shorter winters that we've had as a Blue Jays fan. Yeah, it's always good to sort of take that break, and then you see that pitchers and catchers kind of snuck up on me actually this year a little bit. And I always say, the spring kind of always brings hope back to the team. And this year, I mean, I think we have a lot more reason to hope than we have in years past. I mean, even last year, we had some good vibes, I think, in the spring. I think, having gone to the World Series now and coming, a hair's breadth away from winning it all, I think gives you a lot of reason to be happy and a reason to be glad to be a Blue Jays fan. I think that comes with, a little bit of higher expectations now. This team has been there, and I think the expectations are for this year that we're back there and this time we win. So that's going to be something we might have to deal with if, things don't go well. But I like it. I think the team's really good. I'm happy with, in general, what's gone on in the offseason. I'm sure we'll talk about it all. But yeah, I'm optimistic. It's looking good.
Well, we're going to talk about, I guess, the ins and outs in a moment. But my feeling, kind of laying low over the offseason, has been, I think in past off seasons, you were kind of almost excited to see who they added. And I think this off season, while I think it has been a good one for the front office and the team, I think it's been a little bit kind of a sneaky, kind of sleepy off season. And the other thing from the fans' perspective, I don't know if people were really looking forward to the off season as much as past years, seeing like who they're going to add and how they're going to improve the team. It's more just this year's like everyone just wants to see opening day, I think. And I've spring training this year, I probably paid the least amount of attention to, and it's for a variety of reasons, but these games don't matter, right? Like it's like I don't really care about any of this. I just want the season to get underway and see, I want to see some good swings put on some baseballs. But let's talk about. So I'm just gonna kind of rhyme off the additions to the team, and then we can kind of talk a little bit of maybe about each player, maybe players you're excited about. So we had first signing Dylan Cease, Cody Ponce, reliever Tyler Rogers, Kazuma Okamoto, and Jesus Sanchez. We had also, I think of mention, they bring a lot of players into spring training, but Eloy Jimenez was signed to a minor league deal, and late in the offseason, early in I guess the 2026 season, Max Scherzer decides that he's going to reunite with the Jays. Dustin, any of these players that kind of stick out to you, any ones that you're more excited about, or any talking points that you wanted to mention?
Well, I think you mentioned that it's kind of been a sleepy off season. I think, I see why you're saying that. I think a lot of that has to do with just how quickly they jumped on a few guys early in the off season. Specifically Dylan Cease and Cody Ponce. They really got a head start, and there was a little bit of a lull there while it seemed like Kyle Tucker was making his decision, and we didn't know what it seemed like. Bo was kind of linked to that, and so that kind of stalled things. But in terms of like excitement or the guys that I'm excited to see, it's more just about the improvement around the starting pitching and the depth that we have there. There's a lot of talk about, how it might be a problem from like having so many guys that actually could start in the major leagues. But I don't see that as a problem. So, Dylan Cease looks like really good this spring. I'm super excited to see what he can bring. And Cody Ponce too. I mean, heard good things about him. You know, I watched some of his stuff from the KBO a little bit. I was just one day looking through some tape of his. He looks really good. And, you know, happy to see Max Scherzer back. And so that the starting pitchers lineup right now that looks like what we might start with is Kevin Gausman, Cease, Yasavage, Barrios, and Ponce would probably be the five. But there's depth there. There's Scherzer. There's Eric Lauer. There's just so much options they have, which I was trying to think back, like last year, the five guys that we were looking to start the season with: Gausman, Barrios, Bassett, and like, I think Eric Lauer maybe it's like that was probably it, right? And it just seems.
Sorry, you talking about this year or last year?
No, I'm saying last year, the starting five. Like if you just compare last year's starting five, spring training expected, you know, starting rotation to this year, it's just night and day. And so that's the thing that's excited me most about the offseason, that they really put a lot of attention into the pitching, not only the starting pitching, but also, you know, Tyler Rogers is going to really round out the bullpen, I think, at the, you know, in the 7-8 sort of hold spot. And I've been watching a little bit. I've seen Brendan Little looks pretty good. So I'm happy with the bullpen too. So that's kind of my excitement, you know, from a free agent point of view. You know, the offense is a little bit, well, we can talk about that, but the offense maybe I think is about the same. It hasn't really gotten much worse, but hasn't gotten much better either. But we've improved on the pitching side, which overall I think is a better team this year than last year even.
Well, they seem to identify that definitely. I don't know. Last year I think there was, you know, it was a bit older, but more kind of a workhorsey kind of starting pitching lineup. But I don't know if I really saw it as like a weakness, and I don't know if you're suggesting that, but I think you've said that it's been consistently across the board improved.
Just to clarify, yeah, I don't think it was a weakness last year. I think it was just we had a decent starting five and then like no depth. Now we have a good starting five and then even, you know, more serviceable arms, you know, in Scherzer and Lauer and, you know,
you didn't even mention Shea Savage.
Yeah, exactly. Like Bowden Francis. Well, no, he's injured, right? Yeah.
He is injured. He's on my my subtraction or losses list. But
Shane Bieber's the other one that I'm thinking of. Of yes. Course. Why? How can I forget it? Right. So, you know, him having some injury problems. It's just nice to have so much depth there with Bieber, Scherzer, and Eric Lauer. Sort of, those are 8 serviceable major league starting pitchers that we have on the team, and that's, you know, given all the you know, bullpen days and 6-man, 4-man rotation that we did last year, it's night and day.
I think Okamoto probably is the one I'm most interested in seeing. I don't know if he really excites me the same way if they signed another bat that from another team in the majors, that probably would have excited me more. I think in terms of a sleepy offseason, their biggest offensive signing came from another country, right? So I think they did seem to focus on pitching, and because they didn't land a big bat or re-sign Bo, I don't know. It didn't seem, it wasn't like that kind of splashy, kind of exciting offseason that you know, that got people talking, and I think that's okay. Like I you know, I don't, you really, you want to focus on how this team is going to get better, and basically the starting pitching, it had to get younger, right? It was a little long in the tooth, and I think with some of the guys they've added, one of the names, obviously Dylan Cease, you know, for me he was the top pitcher available, I thought. But I thought it was interesting how journalists and major league execs seem to kind of jump on certain players, because the Athletic did a poll of like what was the worst signing of the offseason, which is kind of, I don't know, not really. You had, I guess you had to pick somebody, right? And Dylan Cease got the most votes for, and I have to assume it's because of the contract he received, and in turn, like basically his ERA and walks were not really great last year. But I don't know, I think this is going to work out quite well. Like if there's anybody who can fix up a pitcher and get him performing at his absolute best, it has to be Pete Walker.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, who knows what criteria people use. I'm guessing that's, you know, when you think about like signings, off-season free agent signings, and like the opportunity for them to turn into like a horrible signing, you know, a pitcher's got to be, you know, higher on that list than most of the offensive players, because of just one, you know, a starting pitcher can only really affect every fifth game, and two, they're highly susceptible to injury, and so paying somebody that much for, you know, that kind of risk is obviously going to trigger some sort of concern. But you know, I'm not too worried about it. He seems to be a fairly healthy guy, and you're right. Yeah, you know, the pitching staff here has been able to turn a lot of guys around who have a lot less talent than Dylan Cease, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see him turn into the ace, and you know, in the coming years, replace Kevin Gausman as the guy on the team. If not Savage, then him for sure.
I did initially in the offseason, I did think that one of the requirements was to either re-sign Bo or sign a bat. And they obviously felt that they could do that via Okamoto, and we will see. But I did want to talk a little bit about like the Kyle Tucker pursuit. And I've been on record in the past of, you know, not really being the biggest Shatkins, I guess, supporter. And I think there was good reason for that. I think there was a lot of, especially the 2024 offseason in particular, that was the peak of it. But there's a few questionable off seasons where you kind of just didn't really know what they were doing. But this Kyle Tucker, you know, yes, they didn't in the end get the player, but I don't really think I would want to be paying Kyle Tucker $60+ million a year anyway. But one of the things I noticed, that they were the only team that was kind of in for like a long-term kind of deal, and they seem to realize that, you know, and whereas in the past, or, you know, it seems like the Jays kind of seem to kind of struggle to understand and read the room, so to speak. They understood that they were the only team that was offering a long-term deal, so they weren't going to really negotiate against themselves. Do you know what I mean? So they stuck to their guns, they stuck to their number, and if they did get Kyle Tucker for 10 years at 350, man, that would have been an immense signing, right? They obviously didn't, because the LA Dodgers exist, and they just kind of the LA Dodgers kind of just seem to like hang out around the corner. They have more resources than anyone else, so they kind of just feast off of whatever everybody has hashed out already, and then they said, oh, okay, we'll just give you this instead. And I think he got 4 years, $64 million a year,
something like that. Yeah.
I think there's some opt-outs in there. There's something completely absurd. We talked about a little bit like about salary caps and stuff like that, and I've always generally been against salary caps, but I don't know if this is really good for like the game in general. I don't really want to go down that alley too much. But Kyle Tucker, give me your thoughts.
I agree that he's not worth $60 million a year for 1 year, let alone, I think he has an opt-out after 2. So I think they have him for 2 at a minimum. I think there's this kind of recent rash of these kinds of signings. I don't know. They used to be called pillow contracts or whatever, but I guess that's more of like a 1 year, see what you can do kind of. But it's sort of like that, but just on steroids, because it's like so much money, short-term contracts, and then these guys, get to sort of bet on themselves, make a lot of money in a short term, and then hopefully, I'm sure in 2 years, 2028, Kyle Tucker will be looking for a long-term something that will take him to the end of his career. It seems like that's kind of a recent trend. I'm not sure it's going to work out for a lot of teams. That's a lot of money to pay for. I mean, I don't know what his expected WAR is going to be, but there's no way it's like worth it I think there's like a 10 million per WAR kind of ballpark that you want to look at, 10 to 11 million. I mean, is he going to get 6? I mean, I guess he could put up a 6-7 WAR season, but I mean,
he hasn't as of yet though.
Man, I don't know. It just seems like a lot. And so I agree. Yeah. The Blue Jays seem to have this sort of mentality. And I think as a fan, it's a good thing to see is that they're looking to sign guys long-term, make a commitment to guys they know are going to be good and that they can, compete year after year in the future. Sometimes it might turn out, like a 2024. Sometimes it might turn out like a 2025. But at least they're trying. They're trying to put together the best team that they can. So are the Dodgers, I guess, to be fair. But I mean, it just seems like I don't know. The Jays, that is, are trying to build more of a long-term kind of family kind of thing, for a lack of a better analogy, versus the Dodgers is more like a mercenary. Just bringing the best guys for this year, and then who cares, 2 years down the road we'll bring in the best guy at that time too. Yeah, I'm happy with what they did. I think it would have been nice, obviously, to have Kyle Tucker and Bo Bichette, but I think Okamoto will be a surprise. From what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, he seems to be a very polished hitter, and he's just, let's say, mature in terms of his knowledge of who he is and what he can do. Looking at his numbers from Japan, it just seems very similar to a Bo Bichette, like in terms of like it seems like a Bo Bichette with a little bit more power, because he did hit for a high average there. I know the pitching's different out there, and so there is that risk, but I mean, if we did bold predictions, I know we don't usually do that, but my bold prediction would be that Okamoto is going to have a better season this year than Bo Bichette.
Ooh, I like it. And we're going to talk about like the subtractions or losses in a moment. But it seems like Okamoto was going to fill that role. Just kind of to touch, the last thing I'll say about Kyle Tucker, I do think he would have been like really a perfect fit. I think absolutely. He basically, George Springer's entering his last year. Kyle Tucker's the right fielder. George Springer, I guess, was the right fielder. And he would have just slid right in, replaced George Springer very nicely. I do wonder if the Jays like stumped up like 400 in December, if that would have kind of moved the needle. Saying that, I'll answer my own question and say probably not, because I think the way that the way that the Major League Baseball offseason kind of goes, it's just kind of, it really drags. And I think he would have said, yeah, okay, great. But he wanted to see their options. And I think that's with most players. I stated to you in our podcast chat that I think the Major League Baseball offseason is the worst offseason in sports. Like it just drags so bad. Yeah. Like there's just, and every day, like, I don't know, every day MLB.com is like, here's the favorites to land Kyle Tucker. And it's like, it's always the same team. It's just the worst.
So you'd rather have like a signing day, a deadline?
Yes, I think having, and you know what, the deadline doesn't have to be before spring training. Like it could be in the middle of spring training or whatever. I don't know, just something that sets like some kind of limit.
The frenzy, the hot stove, yeah.
I don't know, and I think, listen, there's a lot of smart people involved in the game. I'm pretty sure they can come up with something that makes sense. It's just, I don't know what it is. Like, it's every off season it's just like, oh god, here we go again, right? And I'm not just saying that because the Jays have finished second, with a bunch of players. That's not really anything. I find the baseball off season to be just like, it's just painful. Like, as I said, and like the Jays, I think did their best to kind of, they took care of some needs. Like Dylan Cease, I think that was a winter meeting signing. Like it was very quick, right? And he's a Boris client too, so you have to wonder what the conversation was there. Kind of interesting to be on the fly on the wall of that particular in that conversation.
Yeah, he was on the Gate 14 podcast recently and talked a little bit about his decision making there and why he signed so quickly. And one of the things he said was just like all the good things he was hearing about the team, all the good things that the biggest thing he said, besides the money, I'm sure if the contract wasn't where he wanted it to be, we wouldn't have him. But one of the biggest things he said was the Blue Jays were in the World Series last year. Like that was, he's just said it outright. Like that, obviously, that this is a team that's serious about winning, and the money was there, and so I signed. So that right there shows you why it's good to have a competitive team and to get that, to be there in the show every time.
All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the subtractions and losses that the Jays sustained this offseason. All right, we're back. As good as the offseason was for the Jays, they did lose a few players. I'll just rattle them off here quickly. Bo Bichette, Chris Bassett, Bowden Francis was lost due to Tommy John. Ty France, I normally wouldn't mention a player that had been on the team half a season, but he was on the major league roster, so and he did win a Gold Glove, so I'll mention him. Joey Loperfido was traded, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But I think we probably got to talk about Bo, Dustin. What are your thoughts? What I thought they had, I honestly thought there was a point in the offseason, I think I touched on this earlier. I was like, they need to re-sign. This offense can't get worse, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I think, obviously I think we would both agree that the team would be better with Bo than it is now without him. I mentioned earlier that, I think that they've done some stuff with Okamoto and with what you just mentioned there, the trade for Jesus Sanchez, to shore that up as best as they can. I don't know that it, despite my previous sort of bold prediction there, I don't know that it is going to be very likely to replace what Bo would have given him. But that being said, it felt inevitable that he wouldn't come back. I had that gut feeling.
Yeah, 1 foot out the door.
Yeah, even during the season last year was, my gut was that he wasn't coming back, that he wanted to see, what the grass was like on the other side of the lawn, and he just seemed to maybe, I think it came out that there was some tension between him and the front office a couple years ago, probably 24, maybe 23, 24. And while that seemed to have been corrected last year and water under the bridge, it's still, felt like, he just wanted to test the waters. Now he has one of those, opt-out heavy contracts with the Mets, and if the grass isn't greener over there, it is possible to see him come back, and I would welcome that. But I guess I just wasn't super upset about it because I felt like it was coming.
I did, as I said, I felt it was necessary that I'll put it under like the offense not getting worse as like a general thing. So whether it was sign Tucker or re-signing Bo, I'm not upset by it now, and obviously it's business. I'm going to file this under the same as Kyle Tucker. I'm not paying Bo Bichette $40 million a year. No. Sorry, Bo, not worth that. I think there were arguments over the past 2 to 3 years where he probably wasn't even like a top 3 shortstop in the AL East at times, right? Like he's good. He was a great player, but with some of the other shortstops you have around, some considerable competition there. What we did learn over the past, I think I'm going to say about maybe 2 to 3 weeks, was that he wasn't coming back as a shortstop either way. Apparently, after the season was over, the team informed Andrés Giménez that he would be the shortstop in 2026. So if Bo Bichette was to come back, he wasn't going to be at shortstop. I don't think he'd be terribly happy about that. I also think if he came back, signings kind of present problems, and I guess they solve problems, present others. But I do think having him come back and not have him play shortstop would be a little tricky. That would kind of lean on Ernie a little bit, because right now Ernie's going to be the starting second baseman, which I like. I like it a lot. But that's probably where Bo Bichette's going to play, right? If Andrés Giménez is going to be a short, Bo Bichette's very likely going to be a second, especially after what we saw in the World Series. In terms, I'll touch quickly on Bo Bichette's future outlooks. I say, like, good luck to the Mets playing him at third base. You quickly and rightfully pointed out in our chat that he's going to be under the microscope, and literally his first game, there was all kinds of tweets about a throw on which the first baseman was credited with an error. But even in that, they're like, oh, you could see it already. I just, for a guy that struggles to stay healthy, he's a second baseman, in my opinion. He's not a third baseman, but the Mets have enough money to kind of be stupid with it, and to kind of shoehorn players who are really good offensively into spots that maybe they aren't the best at. And I did also say, kind of, I've kind of been on record that Bo Bichette, when we were talking about the whole Vladdy versus Bo Bichette wanted the money, and he wanted to win. So he's going to the Mets. They didn't make the playoffs last year. Maybe they will this year. My bold prediction is that I'm going to say they're not going to make the playoffs this year. That's my bold prediction. But anyway,
fair enough.
Just because. So
yeah,
anyway.
No, I kind of agree. I don't know. They're a good team, but I don't know. It would be interesting if they did get there, and then it's Blue Jays, Mets in the World Series or something, though.
That would be funny. But actually, I saw an absolutely hilarious comment to that. It was kind of in like the Twitter thread that was highlighting that kind of semi-missed throw where the first baseman was credited with an error.
Yeah.
And like this Mets fan is like, oh well, if it doesn't work out at third base, we'll just play him at DH. It's like, okay, but you also have Juan Soto, right?
Yeah.
Like how many DHs are you gonna have on this team, right? And or future quote unquote DHs. So
yeah, I might have a little bit of a different opinion on him at third base than most people. Not only was that throw under the microscope, but I think there was before that even, he was like taking just some like Funko like ground balls at third base. Seemed like he was maybe working in a new glove or something, because he's probably got a different glove at third base, and he, a couple of them went off the heel of his glove, or he just didn't catch them, and it was like, good luck, Bo Bichette at third. But I'm not so sure I agree that he's going to be worse at third base than he was at shortstop. The reason being, maybe I haven't looked into his defensive metrics, and I don't know if I trust the numbers on that stuff anyways, but just eyeball test, his problem for me at shortstop was two things. One, range. Especially in recent years, he seemed to have slowed down. He put on some muscle, and it seems you just not have the range that he used to have. And two was not necessarily his arm, but like his decision-making ability, like when to hold the ball, when to not throw, or, his timing and that kind of thing. And I feel like at third base, those two things are a little bit less important. Like, one, third base doesn't need as much range as shortstop, obviously. Mm-hmm. And two, at third base, like, you play a little bit further back, the ball comes to you faster. That gives you more time to make the decision. Mm-hmm. I never thought that he had a bad arm. I mean, sometimes he would bounce a ball or whatever, but I didn't think he had poor arm strength. So I don't know. I kind of feel like he might be serviceable. I mean, he's not going to be winning a Gold Glove at third base, but I don't see it being unplayable. So I feel like he'll do fine, but that might be an unpopular opinion.
In terms of like the probability kind of map of where this will land, that seems to be the most likely. Bo Bichette is going to miss, not like in New York, he's going to be questioned about everything, right? For everything. Sure. Yeah. Everything is going to be, as you said, under the microscope. And I do think he's going to miss that because, like, listen, the Toronto media is what they are. Like, let's be honest. If you're not the Toronto Maple Leafs, like you're not quite under the microscope unless you're wearing blue and white, right? And so I think he'll miss that. I think he'll miss his camaraderie with Vladdy, and I think he's gonna miss playing in the World Series. Just saying.
Yeah, and there's no like New York Post where there's gonna be a headline of like, "Oh no, Bo" or something. Like there's nothing like that in Toronto. So for sure, there's going to be a lot more of the, scrutiny and just silly shit from the media side of things. So we'll see.
Joey Loperfido. So they brought in Jesus Sanchez, who's, I believe he's going to hit. He's going to, like, a lot of his appearances are going to be against right-handed pitching, has a bit of power. This is one that I thought was a bit head-scratching, Dustin, because I really liked what Joey Loperfido brought to the table. Like, he did a little bit of everything, and he seemed to do it somewhat well. Now, the sample size was super small, really, really small, even smaller than Spencer Horwitz when we were kind of hashing that one out a year ago. But I don't know, like, Dalton Varsho's coming up for free agency this year. I don't know, maybe this is just a kind of like a numbers game where he was just kind of on the outside looking in, but he was a player I wanted to see get a little more time. Kind of like, I could kind of see him being a little, I could kind of see him being a little bit of like an Addison Barger kind of type year where it's like you're not really counting on him this year. Young player comes up from AAA and significantly contributes. Like as I said, the sample size was small, but I'm pretty sure he was hitting over 300 last year when he was in the major. In fact, and this might be unpopular with some people, I would have put him on the playoff roster over Anthony Santander, but that's just me. So your thoughts?
No, I see what you're saying. I think Jesus Sanchez is just a little bit more of a polished major leaguer, and this is just he's an everyday guy versus I don't think Joey Lupifito is more of a platoon bat
at this point
off the bench. Yeah, so I think it's kind of there's kind of a crowded bench. You got Schneider, Lucas, Straw. I don't think those guys. I think those are they're going to be the three that come out of spring, unless that Eloy Jimenez that you mentioned earlier is going to, gives them a reason to add him. But it just seems like he's a lefty with a little bit of speed, Jesus Sanchez, and maybe they're thinking of him as the leadoff guy.
Ooh. Isn't George Springer like nailed on to be the leadoff guy?
Yeah. No, you're right. Or maybe he's a 2. I don't know. We'll see what the lineup comes out. But I don't. Maybe they don't make trades for that reason. But it just seems to be more of a win now kind of move. Somebody that is a little more polished and is a this year kind of guy. And then they have some kids coming up, that RJ Shrek kid, and some other outfielder prospects that are coming up that maybe there's just sort of a log jam.
Yeah, and Joey Lupifito, I felt kind of bad because he's one of those guys that's just like, well, he has options, so we're going to send him down.
Exactly.
And, right, and some players, you pick them up, like they don't have those options, so your hand is forced, and I think when you have a player like that has options, it's kind of the easy move. He's going down, etc. I think before I touch on this one, Chris Bassett, now a Baltimore Oriole. I thought Chris Bassett was an excellent Blue Jay, just a complete workhorse, total professional, and I think he loved being in Toronto. And do I think there was ever a chance he was coming back? No, I don't think he was ever coming back, but. I thought his appearances from the bullpen in the playoffs were, I don't know, it was like it just because it was a different, like you saw him from a different perspective. He's just really good. The guy, I don't know. Yeah, he was just fun to watch pitch. A little frustrating at times. I think Rob talked about how on the road he was not so good, but Kreger and I have seen a lot of Chris Bassett's over the last couple of years. And he always seemed to throw down at home. Anything on Chris Bassett before we move on to our last subtraction?
I mean, you said it better than I could have. Yeah, he was. I'll remember him as an important piece of that 25 season and the whole run up to it. And yeah, go get your money and maybe we'll see him around. It's great to have him on the team. But yeah, I just think there was no room for him on this team. We needed to get younger.
Somebody was going to pay him to be a starting pitcher, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That was just the reality of it. Someone's going to take a chance on a guy who has a quite a long track record of being quite a decent pitcher. And it happened to be the Orioles, and they always seem to need pitching, so it makes sense. The last one on the I guess subtractions or losses, and I don't really know where this one falls, but Anthony Santander obviously is injured for the better part of the 2025 season, gets added to the playoff roster, which I that was completely maddening to me. But he goes through almost the entire offseason. And then we hear he has, I think, labrum surgery, like a shoulder, in January, I'm going to say. I have a bad feeling about this contract for a lot of different reasons, but he's going to be out, 5? Is he going to be out the whole season? Like at this point?
At least 5 or 6 months is the recovery time. We could see him towards the end or playoffs if...
Oh, not again.
He's healthy.
Yeah. I hope. Listen, I hope we don't have a redo of 2025 because watching him try to figure it out in the playoffs was I was pulling the little hair that I have out of the top of my head.
I get you. I mean, I think a healthy Santander. I mean, when we signed him, there was a reason, and I was hopeful that he would be healthy and be able to contribute some power, and maybe if he can recover fast enough, and he might have a month or so to ramp up before the playoffs, and maybe he'll be useful. We'll see. More likely, we won't see him much this year at all, and we'll see him next year. It's a rough. I think no matter what, it's a rough contract. I was so surprised to hear the surgery, and I think it was like right at the start of spring training. Yeah, seemed to be what happened was that, he had the shoulder problems last year, tried to rest it up, tried to come back, felt it some more, and then thought, well, okay, I'll use the off season to recover, heal up, and then we'll be good in the spring. I guess there was some MRI or something that didn't show anything, didn't show any damage at the end of last year. And then when he was ramping up and starting to swing this spring, he started to feel it again, and then MRI showed damage. It sucks because, like, fuck, man, like you had this. If you had this surgery in November or October, you'd be ready for spring, or at least for May or June or something. Man, I think his contract was 5 years, so now 2 out of the 5 years are lost, and those were the 2 years that probably would have been the best years. We would have been hoping when we signed the 5-year deal that those would have been, his most productive years out of the 5. So, it's probably going to end up being one of those lost contracts, or, top 10 worst contracts in Blue Jays history kind of things. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe he can come back and contribute next year.
Well, I was musing with Rob about the whole surgery thing, and technically a team cannot force a player to have surgery.
No.
They can, like, there can be, items in the contract where essentially they either incentivize or, I guess, disincentivize the player from not getting it, but they can't force the player to get surgery. So if Anthony, and the Jays are pretty player focused, right? And I think they probably went with, was it a lot, if the MRI didn't show anything, then, I guess you have to go with that. But yeah, if he had surgery back in whatever, November, right after the World Series, then he possibly could have been a bigger contributor to the upcoming season, but he's not going to be. And as much as I liked the signing at the time, I don't think Anthony Santander gets signed. Like now that the Jays have kind of found their feet a little bit, he's not the type of player that I don't think they would sign. No. Or should they really sign? I think it was, they need a bat. They need a big bopper, right? And so they went and got one.
I think, the year before we just didn't have any home runs. So the whole conversation around that offseason was, we need more power. And we missed out on Ohtani. I think it was that was the year. And then it was like, okay, well, let's get Santander.
Yeah. And he was I think he was only behind Judge in the AL in terms of homers. So it made sense. Right. But Anthony Santander is like, he just doesn't fit what the Jays are really doing. And I think in the playoffs we saw that, like with that, I think he was in right field at Yankee Stadium, and it was like, oh God, this is just like, what is he doing? Like, what is he doing? And I think when, the Jays in the 2023 offseason, that's when they like really slammed the brick on the gas pedal of the whole like, oh, we're gonna play better defense. I don't think it should have been. Maybe you kind of drifted in that direction, but yeah, I Anthony Santander, I don't. He's a square peg in a round hole, I think, at this point. And if you can get anything from him at all, like even a year of 20 homers, I think at this point of the contract is like, you're salvaging essentially with the contract. So I was a bit disappointed to hear that, but it's just like, I don't know. It's sports sometimes, right? I'm sure the Jays have injury insurance, so someone else is probably paying for that large contract that he has. Dustin, anything else you want to touch on? We'll do some more, I guess, preseason Jay stuff, but I kind of wanted to mop up the off season a little bit and just kind of. Because there's a lot of little things to talk about in the offseason. I don't know if there's like a huge, massive thing like Ohtani or missing out on Soto or obviously the Vladdy deal last year. Those are all just absolutely kind of albatross kind of discussion points that everybody wants to get in on.
Yeah, nothing on that front. I feel like maybe something I want to talk about in the future episode maybe is just expectations. What do we think? Just as a teaser, is George Springer going to have another year like last year? Is Addison Barger going to take a step? What do we expect from Okamoto and Jimenez and Clement? So I think those are the kinds of conversations we can look forward to.
All right, Dustin, I think we'll wrap this one up. Thank you very much for joining me.